Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're doing good and well. So horror season continues on the channel, this time with a ranking of the Final Destination films. So if you're not familiar with the Final Destination movies, they're built on the idea that even if you manage to escape death, usually in a specific event or an accident or something, that it will still come after you soon afterwards. Essentially what happens at the start of each of these films is our protagonist or our visionary, the main character, will have a premonition about events which are about to follow. And that will usually be an accident involving their friends or a group of people who are killed off one by one in that accident. What happens after that is the premonition ends and it cuts back to our main character, who then usually will try and prevent or will try and stop themselves from getting in that situation with the group of people who are killed off one by one. And the rest of the film follows after the premonition, and typically the characters are killed off one by one in the order that they were killed off in the premonition, unless somehow they manage to cheat death again. So it's all a very interesting concept, and I think that the thing I like about these films is they do play very well on our everyday fears, the things that could happen to us, right? Road accidents, plane crashes, something happening in our own homes to us, and I think that idea of sort of death meant to happen, death by design, is it creates a lot of opportunities for creativity with what they do with these films. And I think that, none of these films are particularly award-winning for me as such. They're not necessarily great films, but there are some I really do enjoy, some obviously more than others, hence why I'm doing this ranking. But yeah, let's crack on with this ranking. What I'll also do is for each of the films, I will also talk a bit about the visionary, and I'll give the visionary a score out of 10 as well for how I rate them. Just to add something else to the video, because there's only 5 films here, not expecting it to take me too long to get through each film. So coming in bottom place as my least favourite movie is Final Destination 4, The Final Destination. It was meant to be the last film, I believe, in the series, of course. It's still carried on to Final Destination 5 and maybe is getting a 6th film at some point. So the problem I have with Final Destination 4, this was directed by David R. Ellis. Our visionary in this film is Nicholas O'Bannon, and he's played by Bobby Campo. So the disaster, the premonition sequence in this is of a speedway accident. Cars crashing into each other and flying around into the crowds with all sorts of debris and everything. The problem I have with this film, actually, the premonition sequence is, for me, the worst premonition sequence in all the films. The CGI is, frankly, awful. And that's one of the big problems, because for me, Final Destination works best when the kills are made to look at least a bit realistic. And the CGI is so bad in this movie, it affected my enjoyment of it from the very start, which got the film off to a bad start. Otherwise, the characters, though, are also all kind of shallow in this film. Even our protagonist, I'm not all that keen on. I'll move on to him in a second. And it just felt like it sort of, even, as I say, even the kills weren't very effective. You never expect a huge amount of story in these movies, but what there was, the threads there were, I also thought were rather weak. And just the film as a whole just lacked character and felt very predictable. And as I say, bad effects mean this is my least favourite movie. Now, moving on to our protagonist here, Nick O'Bannon, played by Bobby Campo. Now, didn't really dislike his character as such, but I did find that there was just a lack of backstory or any development to him at all, so found it hard to really relate to him much. I did like the way he fought towards the end of this movie, I think, a little bit, or the way he saved, rather, the people in the cinema and everything. I mean, that was quite good. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I think I'd give him maybe a 6 out of 10 as his rating, to be honest. Like I say, I didn't particularly dislike him, but there's just not enough depth, and I just found that I prefer the other characters in the other 4 films that bit more, to be frank. I didn't mention what the best kill in this film was, and I was going to do that as well. So the death with, I think it's Laurie on the escalator, was the most brutal, even though I still thought it didn't look that great. It was kind of brutal, and actually it wasn't actually what really happened. As I recall, this was another sort of premonition type thing. But yeah, Final Destination 4 is my least favourite movie, and Nick O'Bannon gets a 6 out of 10 from me. Next up, we have Final Destination 5 as my next least favourite, or my next up in the ranking. Final Destination 5 was directed by Stephen Quayle, and our visionary in this film is Sam Lawton. So at the start, the premonition sequence in this one is a collapsing suspension bridge, where our characters are gradually killed off one by one in nasty ways, or sort of, as they fall off the bridge, or however it is that they die in this one. So I slightly prefer this to the fourth film because I think it gets back more to what Final Destination was doing better in the previous films. I think there's slightly better suspense for one thing. I think the effects are a little better, although still not particularly good in this movie. And I think it's a little bit more creative with what it does. I found that Tony Todd coming back also helped this one. I think he's a great character in these films. I enjoy his presence. And I love the dovetail at the end of this film with the first Final Destination film. I thought that was actually really clever and nicely executed. So we move on to the protagonist of Final Destination 5, who is Sam Lawton. Now I like him a little more than I think I liked Nick O'Bannon. I liked the way he really tried to save Molly in a few situations. You know, when he's fighting the other guy, I think it's Peter, towards the end of the film, and even the way he tries really hard to save Molly in the plane crash and everything that happens, the plane accident. I just like him just a little more. I still think that I struggle with, he's a slightly wooden character, you know, there's nothing here that, you know, I can necessarily relate to all that much, so I just find that, or I don't find him all that interesting again, but just slightly better maybe as a visionary, but you may have your own opinions, feel free to drop those in the comments. But yeah, he's my next up, and he's going to get a score of 6.5 out of 10. So Sam Lawton gets a 6.5 out of 10 from me. Next up, we move on to Final Destination 3, the third film in this series, which came out in 2006. This was directed by James Wong, who did the first movie, if I'm right. And this stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead. She is the visionary. She's playing Wendy Christensen. And what I love about this film is the premonition sequence, actually, the roller coaster. And props to the cast and crew here, because they clearly put a huge amount of effort into this scenes. I understand that hours and hours went into filming the roller coaster sequence, which I think is pretty good. It's not perfect to me, and I do find that character, that Frankie guy, absolutely kind of really just awful, and to me actually that slightly spoils the suspense, the tension a little bit in the run into the roller coaster ride in the premonition sequence that we see. But it's still a very good sequence, and actually one of, for me, maybe the best premonition sequence in all the films, bar maybe one other, which I'm going to come to soon. So yeah, great kills in this film. I think the kills are of the more imaginative variety. The nail gun with Erin is going to be my choice for the best kill in Final Destination 3. Now we move on to our protagonist for this film, which is Wendy Christensen, who is frankly adorable, I think, in this movie. I think she's well portrayed as well by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who's gone on to other things since the Final Destination franchise. I enjoy her portrayal. I like that she has a bit of vulnerability, but she also does have a bit of determination to her as well as the film goes on, and she builds that up for me, I think. And yeah, a very likeable character. I'm going to give Wendy Christensen, therefore, a 7 out of 10. I still don't think I quite, you know, still something there that I you know, she's certainly, for me, anyway, I think I'm going to stick to my 7 out of 10 score with her. I think that maybe more could have been built into her character actually in this film, even I think there was lots of potential there. So yeah, 7 out of 10. Moving on to number 2 in this ranking. So my second favourite movie, which is the original Final Destination. Directed by James Wong, as I say. This one stars Alex Browning as our visionary here, and he's played by Devon Sawa. Yeah, so this is the original. It's not quite the best for me. There is one I slightly prefer, which I'm very shortly going to be revealing. What I like about this film is I think it has the creepiness and suspense, perhaps more than any of the other films. It's because it's the first movie, it's fresh, the idea is fresh, and therefore it's effective. And my favourite kill, the best kill in this one for me, was probably Terry Chaney, who is just actually one of the rare things in this film. It's an unexpected kill. She is taken out by this bus, and you're just like, whoa, you know, when I was watching this, it took me by surprise even. So I thought, you know, props for that. Great kill as well here. So yeah, okay, let's move on to our protagonist from this original film, Alex Browning. I think this is my favourite of the male visionaries in this franchise. I like Alex because he seems a bit more real, right? He's got a little bit more depth. He's got all these anxieties, and he shows this anxiety. I think the actor does a good job sort of performing out all the anxieties he has before the plane crash, for instance, and afterwards, and with fear of what's going to happen to his friends. I really like his building relationship with Clear Rivers in this film. That for me is actually one of my favourite relationship type scenarios in any of these movies. I think Alex is a little bit more genuine. I like his genuine sordidness. Even though he's not, he's not perfect. Actually, he does save Clear Rivers towards the end of the movie as well. So he's got a hero element to him in that respect. I'm not sure if I would put him as warrior on a tier list. If I do a Final Guys tier list, maybe I should save my thoughts actually on that before I get to my Final Guys tier list, which I am eventually hoping to do. But yeah, I'm going to give him a solid 7 out of 10, as I did with Wendy Christensen. I think he's got more character than the other two male protagonists we have in this series. And yeah, I like the elements of his vulnerability, but also that he really tries throughout this movie to change things and to save people. And I like that about Alex, actually. But anyway, that's the next one. So we move on to my number one Final Destination film of all time. And this is Final Destination 2, directed by David R. Ellis. And our visionary in this one is Kimberly Corman, portrayed by AJ Cook. And the premonition sequence in this one is a logging truck accident. Just causes mayhem as logs fall off this truck. Cars crash into each other everywhere. Absolute mayhem. And I think this is my favourite sequence next to the roller coaster. I can't really decide between them, because I think both are very, very well done. But the carnage in this premonition sequence is done very well. And it feels more believable for me than maybe any of the other premonition sequences. So maybe it is my number one premonition sequence, this kind of road accident scenario. A lot to like for me in Final Destination 2. Still don't think it's a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination. It does have one or two issues, and sometimes I don't understand the rules surrounding surviving death that happen. What I like about this one is the developing relationship of Officer Burke with Kimberly Corman. I think I like the way they sort of build up strength together, in particular the way that's demonstrated with the final scene. So spoiler alert here, with Kimberly Corman actually managing to, she sacrifices herself in effect towards the end of the film to save Officer Burke and stuff, and I think that's at least what happens. And I do like that sort of the chemistry they have, I think is pretty good in the film. The other reason I like Kimberly Corman though as a character in this one, in fact I'm moving on here to my character assessment before I've gotten necessarily to the end of what I liked about the film. So I think this film also does have some really good kills, some of the best kills in the entire franchise, perhaps also why it's my number one choice. Perhaps the best ones in this, I couldn't choose between, actually, I think it is Nora Carpenter and Tim Carpenter. Both of their deaths are pretty gruesome and nasty. And I felt for Nora because she just lost her son and then she has a horrific death as well on top of that. And I felt for that character a bit. And so, again, what this film achieves better than the other films, I think, is slightly better characterization. Anyway, let's go back to Kimberly Corman. So Kimberly Corman, actually, I like the way she meets with Clear Rivers and links up with her. Clear Rivers, not a character I've talked about a huge amount yet. If I had a favourite character in this whole series, it might actually be Clear Rivers, but she's not a visionary or protagonist, so I'm not giving her a rating. But Kimberly Corman, I think she has a grit. She has a toughness that builds up through the film. I like her determination. And as I say, I like the chemistry she has with Officer Burke and the building relationship there, and just the fact that she's really trying to figure things out. So I think she gets my highest rating because I just see a strength there for sure in her character, that there's just a grittiness that I like. So Kimberly Corman is going to be an 8 out of 10. She is there for my top visionary, my top protagonist, I think, as well as being in my favourite Final Destination film. So let me know what you think about these films in the comments, guys. Always welcome to your own opinions. Obviously, they can be completely different to my opinions on these films or the protagonists. Otherwise, for me, I hope you enjoyed this latest premiere in the horror videos that I've been doing lately. Otherwise, from me, take care and bye for now.